the millionaire flew his new love on a private jet. But the pilot turned out to be his ex. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The private jet shimmered under the afternoon sun, its silver body gleaming like a promise of power and luxury. Inside the terminal, Adrian Cole walked with deliberate steps. His suit was pressed, his shoes polished, and at his side clung a striking young woman in a designer dress, her laughter light and practiced. To the world, she looked like the perfect new love of a billionaire. To Adrian, she was something else entirely. She was a contract, a carefully arranged solution to a problem his board of directors would never stop reminding him about. The inheritance papers had been clear. To maintain full control of his empire, Adrian was expected to settle down. A wife, a family, an image of stability. It was not love they demanded, but performance. And so he had chosen an agreement, not affection. This woman by his side had signed her name on dotted lines, promising to appear at his side during galas, board meetings, and now this carefully orchestrated flight to Miami. But as Adrian stepped closer to the aircraft, something twisted in his chest. A flicker of memory he had not invited. A face from years ago, a voice he had not been able to erase. He pushed it down, straightened his shoulders, and guided his companion up the stairs. The cabin smelled of leather and cedar polish. Champagne waited in crystal glasses. Everything screamed wealth and control. Until the cockpit door opened. She turned with the ease of a professional, a dark braid slipping over her shoulder, her pilot's uniform crisp against the glow of the Sunday. For a moment, Adrian forgot how to breathe. Clara, the name slammed into him like turbulence at 30,000 feet. Clara Hart, the woman he had once loved with a reckless, consuming fire. The woman he had walked away from when his ambition had demanded more than she could give, and now, impossibly, she stood here in the seat of authority, the captain of his flight, the master of the sky he thought he owned. Their eyes locked. Hers were calm, controlled, the same hazel flecked with gold that had once undone him. His new girlfriend shifted, unaware of the silent earthquake that had just erupted. Adrian forced a polite smile. Nodding like this was nothing more than business, but every nerve inside him screamed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole," Clara said, her voice smooth, professional, distant. He tried to answer, but his throat felt dry. He had faced hostile takeovers, ruthless investors, competitors who wanted nothing more than to see him fall. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. To see Clara again, not as the girl he had left behind, but as the woman who now held his safety, his control, and perhaps even his secrets, in her hands. The engines roared to life, vibrating through the cabin. Adrian sat down beside his new partner, but his gaze lingered toward the cockpit door. What had once been buried was alive again. And for the first time in years, the billionaire who thought he could buy and control everything realized he was about to face something money could never dictate. Love, loss, and the truth staring back at him from the pilot's seat. Adrian sat stiffly in the leather seat, his jaw tight as the jet began to roll down the runway. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, drowning out the rehearsed laughter of the woman beside him. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and artificial, whispering about the gala they were due to attend in Miami. He nodded absently, but his thoughts were trapped in the cockpit. Clara's voice echoed in his mind, professional and distant, a sharp contrast to the warmth he once knew. He could still remember the nights they had driven along the coast with the windows down, her laughter mixing with the sound of the ocean. Back then, she had dreamed of becoming a pilot, while he had dreamed of building an empire. They had sworn to chase their futures together, but when his business demanded sacrifice, it was Clara he had left behind. The plane lifted smoothly into the sky, New York shrinking beneath them. Adrian's companion scrolled on her phone, perfectly content to pose for photographs later, perfectly content with the check waiting for her after their contract ended. She was an arrangement, not a risk. But Clara was a storm he had never prepared for. Hours later, as the jet cut through a sea of clouds, Adrian excused himself under the guise of stretching his legs. He walked quietly toward the cockpit, his heart pounding harder with every step. He stopped at the threshold. Through the glass he could see her, focused on the controls, every movement precise, her posture steady. She had grown into her dream, into a woman who commanded the sky. She sensed him and glanced over her shoulder. For a heartbeat, the years melted away. Her hazel eyes locked with his, carrying memories that neither of them had spoken aloud in nearly a decade. "You should not be here," Clara said evenly, her hands steady on the controls. Adrian swallowed. "I needed to see you." "Oh, this is not the time, Mr. Cole," she replied, her tone clipped, using his formal name like a blade. Mr. Cole. She had never called him that before. It was always Adrian, always with warmth. Now it was distance, ice layered over old wounds. "I did not know you would be here," he said quietly. Clara's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "Neither did I." Life has a sense of irony, does it not? The co-pilot cleared his throat, and Adrian reluctantly stepped back, returning to the cabin. But the encounter lingered. He could not shake the weight of her words, the finality in her voice. By the time the jet touched down in Miami, the sun had dipped low, painting the runway gold. Paparazzi waited beyond the gates, cameras ready to capture the billionaire and his glamorous new partner. Adrian put on the mask of charm, smiling, guiding the young woman down the stairs as if nothing was wrong. But behind him, Clara remained in the cockpit, her expression unreadable. At the gala that evening, the ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the murmur of powerful voices. Adrian's date clung to him, whispering lines she had rehearsed to impress the press. He played along, but his gaze drifted often, searching the crowd, haunted by the sight of Clara's steady hands on the controls. When the speeches began, Adrian excused himself and stepped into a quiet hallway. The air was cooler, the noise distant. He leaned against the wall, loosening his tie, trying to steady the turmoil inside him. He had built an empire on control, on strategy, on never letting emotions interfere. But one glance from Clara had undone him more than any hostile takeover ever could. Somewhere above the city, he knew, she was flying again, guiding another aircraft, answering only to the sky. And for the first time in years, Adrian wondered if all his victories had been worth the one thing he had lost. The echo of her voice stayed with him as he returned to the gala, a question he could not silence. Would Clara ever forgive him? Or had the door to their past closed forever, leaving him with only the cold comfort of contracts and empty champagne glasses? The following morning, sunlight streamed across the balcony of Adrian's penthouse suite. Miami glittered below, but Adrian's thoughts were far from the ocean or the skyline. He had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying Clara's face in the cockpit, the way her voice had sliced through the air like clean steel. His companion was still asleep, one arm flung across silk sheets, unconcerned with the turmoil twisting inside him. She had fulfilled her role perfectly the night before, smiling for photographs, holding his hand when the cameras flashed. But when the ballroom lights had dimmed and the applause faded, Adrian had felt only emptiness. He poured himself a black coffee and stood by the window, restless. A knock at the door startled him. His assistant entered, arms full of folders. "The board wants confirmation that you will attend the shareholders' meeting next week," she said briskly. Adrian nodded without really listening. The weight of his empire pressed down on him, but it was not the boardroom he feared. It was the thought of facing Clara again. By mid-afternoon, duty dragged him back into motion. A charity luncheon demanded his presence. His contract partner slipped into another designer dress, flashing him a polished smile. They stepped into the lobby where cameras swarmed like bees. Questions shouted about the couple's plans. Adrian kept his responses vague, his charm mechanical. All the while, his mind replayed a single moment. Clara's eyes in the cockpit, calm but distant. Later that evening, he found himself wandering the marina after the event. The air smelled of salt and gasoline, yachts rocking gently in the water. He needed space to breathe. As he walked along the docks, he heard a voice he knew better than his own heartbeat. "Still chasing the world, Adrian?" He turned. Clara stood by a small training jet, dressed down in her pilot's jacket, her braid tucked neatly behind her. She looked stronger than he remembered, and more unreachable. "I did not expect to see you here," he admitted. She shrugged. "Miami is a small city when you live in the sky." For a moment, Neither spoke. The sounds of the harbor filled the silence. Gulls calling, waves lapping, distant music from a yacht party. Finally, Adrian stepped closer. "I owe you more than silence, Clara," he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "You owe me nothing, Adrian. You made your choice years ago. I built a life without you." Her words struck harder than he anticipated. He wanted to argue, to tell her he had never forgotten, but she turned away, checking the wing of the jet with practiced movements. "You always did know how to escape," he said. She paused, her hand resting on the metal surface. "No, I learned how to survive." The conversation ended there, but the weight of it lingered as Adrian walked back to his car. He had faced countless battles, negotiated contracts worth billions, but he had no defense against Clara's truth. That night, back in his penthouse, Adrian stared at the unsigned papers on his desk. Contracts, mergers, agreements. Pieces of paper that determined the course of his empire. Yet the one connection he could not command, the one woman who had once believed in him, was slipping further away with every calculated move. As he set his pen down, he realized something with startling clarity. If he continued down this path, he would win every deal, but lose the only part of himself that still felt real. The engines of Clara's jet roared in his memory, a reminder that she had built her life with her own strength. And for the first time in years, Adrian wondered if he had the courage to fight for something not measured in profits or power, but in forgiveness. The city lights stretched endlessly below, but his gaze was fixed on the sky. Somewhere above those clouds, Clara was flying, free from the chains he had wrapped around his own heart. And he knew that unless he faced the truth, he would remain grounded in emptiness, while she soared beyond his reach. The following week arrived with a storm of expectations. The shareholders' meeting was set to be the most decisive in years, a gathering where Adrian was expected to prove not only his dominance in business but also his image as a stable, committed man. The ballroom of the downtown hotel had been transformed into a hall of power, with rows of suited investors, flashes of cameras, and whispers that could topple reputations in seconds. Adrian entered with his contract partner on his arm, their smiles perfectly rehearsed. The crowd surged toward him, hands extended, compliments flowing. To everyone else, he was the untouchable billionaire, the man who never bent, never faltered. But beneath his polished exterior, Adrian's thoughts strayed again and again to Clara. As the meeting progressed, he delivered his speech flawlessly. He spoke of growth, of new ventures, of steady leadership. The board members nodded. Investors clapped. The press scribbled in their notebooks. Yet the applause sounded hollow to him. He could command numbers, but he could not command the silence that filled him when Clara's face crossed his mind. When the meeting adjourned, the crowd flowed into the reception hall for cocktails. It was there that Adrian's mask slipped. From across the room, through the glittering crowd of executives and socialites, he saw her. Clara was speaking quietly with a representative from an aviation firm, her pilot's jacket draped neatly over her arm. She was not a guest chasing champagne or networking for profit. She was there because her reputation as a skilled pilot had earned her an invitation. Adrian's heart lurched. For a moment, he forgot the role he was supposed to play. His contract partner tugged at his sleeve, whispering something about photo opportunities. But his eyes remained locked on Clara. Finally, he excused himself and crossed the room. "Clara," he said, his voice lower than he intended. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole." The title stung. The distance between them was sharper than the crystal glasses clinking nearby. "I need a moment," he pressed. She studied him for a beat, then nodded toward a quieter hallway. They walked together, the noise of the reception fading behind them. When they stopped, Adrian let out the breath he had been holding. "You look stronger than ever," he said softly. Clara's eyes narrowed. Strength was not a choice. It was survival. Adrian swallowed, the weight of her words pressing against him. "I left because I thought I had to choose between love and building my empire. I told myself it was the only way. But seeing you now," he shook his head, "I realize I may have built everything and still lost the one thing that mattered." Clara's lips tightened. "Do not do this, Adrian. Do not stand here in the shadow of your empire and act as if regret is enough. You cannot undo the past." The silence stretched between them, charged with all the things they had never said. Then Clara stepped back, her shoulders squared. "I have a flight in the morning. That is my life now." Adrian wanted to stop her, to confess that every calculated decision he had made since leaving her had led him back to this aching emptiness. But the words froze in his throat. He watched as she walked away, her silhouette swallowed by the light of the ballroom. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, Adrian stared at his reflection in the glass window. The city sprawled below, vibrant and alive, but he felt detached, as if watching from behind a wall. His companion from the contract marriage arrangement had long since retired to her own suite. The performance continued, but his heart was no longer in it. He reached into his drawer and pulled out an old photograph, one of him and Clara taken years ago, smiling on a sunlit pier. Back then, neither of them had money, power, or expectation. They had only each other. And now, with everything he had gained, Adrian realized how little it meant without her. The night stretched long, and for the first time in years, Adrian admitted to himself that no contract, no empire, no carefully curated image could silence the truth. He still loved Clara, and unless he found the courage to prove it, he would remain the loneliest man in a world he thought he owned. Rain pounded against the windows of the estate as Adrian Cole returned from another evening of endless obligations. The charity gala had been a success by every measurable standard. Photographers had captured him with his contract partner smiling at his side. Investors had toasted his leadership, and the press had written glowing reviews of his empire's stability. To the outside world, he was the perfect image of wealth and control. Yet inside, he felt like a hollow man playing a role that was no longer his. He shrugged off his soaked coat, the silence of the mansion pressing in around him. The corridors echoed with his footsteps, the grandeur of marble floors and chandeliers only reminding him of how empty his life had become. His contract partner had already retired upstairs. Her role as companion performed flawlessly but without a single thread of sincerity. Adrian poured himself a drink and stood by the fireplace, the amber liquid glowing in the light of the flames. His mind replayed the hallway conversation with Clara, the steel in her voice when she told him survival had made her strong. He had faced competitors who would stop at nothing, but nothing compared to the quiet resolve in her eyes. The sound of his phone buzzing broke the silence. His assistant's voice came through the line, urgent. "There is trouble, Mr. Cole. One of the shareholders leaked information to the press. They are claiming your relationship is staged, that your so-called engagement is a cover-up to secure control of the company." Adrian's grip on the glass tightened. He had expected opposition, but the timing was merciless. "Who leaked it?" he asked. "We suspect Martin Reynolds. He has been lobbying to remove you from your position. The board is demanding you address the rumors immediately." Adrian ended the call and sank into the leather chair, his mind racing. The contract arrangement had been designed to protect him, but now it was the very weapon being used to bring him down. He could already imagine the headlines, "The billionaire who faked love to keep his throne." Hours later, Adrian stood before the board of directors. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with accusation. Reynolds smirked from the far end of the table, the satisfaction of sabotage evident on his face. "Mr. Cole," one of the senior members began, "these allegations put the company at risk. Investors want assurance that our leader is a man of integrity. Explain to us why we should trust you." Adrian met their gazes, his jaw set. For once, the carefully rehearsed charm deserted him. Instead, he spoke plainly. "The truth is that I entered into an arrangement. I let fear of losing control dictate my choices. And in doing so, I betrayed not only the image you expect from me, but also myself. I will not stand here and pretend it was anything more than it was. But I will not let this company be destroyed by lies either. If you want my resignation, you will have it. If you want my leadership, it will be on my terms without deception." The room erupted in murmurs. Reynolds leaned back, smug, believing he had won. But Adrian felt something he had not felt in years: relief. He had spoken honestly, stripped of the armor of performance. That night, as he drove back through the rain-slicked streets, Adrian made a decision. The empire could stand or fall, but he could no longer live in the shadows of contracts and masks. He thought of Clara, of the life she had built with her own strength, and knew he had only one chance to show her he was more than the man who left. When he arrived at the estate, he did not pour another drink or sink into silence. Instead, he pulled out the old photograph of them on the pier, placed it on his desk, and whispered into the empty room. No more contracts. No more pretending. If I want to earn her forgiveness, it must be with truth. Outside, the storm raged on, but for the first time in years, Adrian felt the beginning of clarity. The empire could wait. Tomorrow, he would find Clara. And this time, he would not let fear decide for him. Morning broke gray and heavy, the storm clouds lingering over the city like a warning. Adrian Cole had not slept. His decision from the night before echoed in his chest with every heartbeat. He would not continue the charade. He would not live behind contracts or let deception define him. Today, he would face Clara, no matter what it cost. By mid-morning, Adrian found himself at the small regional airfield where Clara often flew charter routes. The air smelled of fuel and wet asphalt, the hum of engines carrying across the tarmac. He spotted her near a twin-engine plane, clipboard in hand, her braid tucked under her cap. She was issuing instructions to the ground crew with calm authority, the same steady presence that had haunted his thoughts for weeks. "Clara," he called. She turned, surprise flickering across her features before she masked it with professional coolness. "Mr. Cole, what are you doing here?" Adrian walked closer, his shoes sinking slightly into the damp ground. "I came to talk, not as Mr. Cole, as Adrian." Clara crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You should be at a board meeting, or on the cover of another magazine, not standing in the mud chasing ghosts." He stopped a few feet from her. "I told the board the truth. I admitted the arrangement. They can take everything if they want, but I will not hide anymore. I came here because I cannot keep living a life built on lies. Not with them, not with you." For the first time, her composure slipped. The clipboard trembled slightly in her hands. "Do not do this, Adrian. Do not drag me into your crisis of conscience. This is not about my company," he said firmly. "This is about us. I left you because I thought ambition was everything. But I see you now, standing here, living the dream you once told me about. And I realize I threw away the only thing that mattered. Clara, I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a chance to prove I am not the man who walked away." Her eyes searched his face, filled with old hurt, and the faintest flicker of something he could not name. "Words are easy for you, Adrian. You have always been good with speeches. But speeches will not fix what you broke." Or, before he could answer, a voice called from the plane. "Captain Hart, we are ready for takeoff." Clara looked back toward the aircraft, her decision already made. She turned to Adrian, her tone clipped, but not unkind. "I have a flight to run. My passengers depend on me. That is who I am now." Adrian stepped aside, watching as she walked toward the plane, her posture strong, unshaken. The engines roared to life, and he stood rooted to the ground as the aircraft taxied down the runway and lifted into the gray sky. Hours later, Adrian returned to his estate. The mansion felt colder than ever, every gilded frame and marble surface mocking him with its emptiness. His contract partner had already ended their arrangement, sending back the jewelry he had gifted her along with a terse message. "Find someone who actually wants to play this game." He did not bother replying. That evening, Adrian sat at his desk, staring again at the old photograph of him and Clara on the pier. His phone buzzed with dozens of messages, shareholders demanding answers, reporters requesting interviews, lawyers urging him to fight Reynolds. But he ignored them all. His world of power and image was crumbling, and for the first time, he welcomed it. Because now, he saw the truth clearly. Clara was not a chapter he could rewrite, or a memory he could bury. She was the only person who had ever seen him without the armor of wealth and ambition. And unless he found a way to show her that the man she loved still existed, all of his battles would mean nothing. As night fell, Adrian poured the untouched drink down the sink, straightened his shoulders, and whispered to himself, "This time, I will not let her walk away, not without knowing the truth." Oh, outside, the storm clouds began to part, and a sliver of moonlight broke through, casting its glow across the empty halls. For Adrian, it felt like the first fragile promise of a second chance. The next morning, Adrian Cole arrived at the headquarters of his company knowing a storm was waiting. The lobby buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as questions were hurled in his direction. Is it true your relationship was a contract? Are you stepping down as CEO? He ignored them, his gaze fixed on the elevator doors. Inside, the weight of the building pressed against him like stone. The boardroom was packed. Investors sat with folded arms, their eyes sharp with judgment. At the far end, Martin Reynolds leaned back in his chair, smugness written across his face. Adrian took his seat at the head of the table, his hands steady despite the tension. One of the directors cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, the media frenzy is growing. Stockholders are panicking. We need a definitive answer. Are you capable of leading this company with integrity, or will you step aside?" Adrian stood, his voice calm but firm. "I will not deny what has already been revealed. Yes, I entered into an arrangement. I did it out of fear, out of pressure, and it was wrong. But I will not allow this company to be destroyed by whispers. The truth is out now, and the truth is the only way forward." Reynolds smirked. "The shareholders deserve better than a man who lies to protect his throne." Adrian met his gaze without flinching. "And they also deserve better than a man who sabotages his own company for personal gain." "I know you leaked the story, Reynolds. While you plotted, I was building. While you schemed, I was leading. This company stands because of my decisions, and I will not let it collapse under yours." The room fell silent. A few directors shifted uneasily, but several nodded in quiet agreement. "The tide was turning," Adrian continued, his tone steady. "If the board wishes to remove me, I will accept that decision. But I will not cling to power built on deception. From this moment on, everything I do will be transparent. No more arrangements, no more masks, only truth." For the first time in days, he felt lighter. Reynolds' smirk faltered, the certainty in his eyes cracking. The meeting ended with no vote, the directors choosing to deliberate. But Adrian knew the real battle was not here. It was with Clara. That evening, he returned to his estate, the city glowing beneath the night sky. The mansion was silent, but for once, it did not suffocate him. He stepped onto the balcony, the old photograph of him and Clara still in his hand. He whispered into the darkness, as if she could hear him across the miles. "I am done hiding. If I lose everything, so be it. But I will not lose her without a fight." The wind swept through the terrace, carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere out there, Clara was flying under the same sky, and Adrian knew that the next step would decide not only his future as a leader, but the fate of the love he had almost let slip away forever. 2 days later, Adrian Cole made a decision that shocked everyone. He called a press conference, inviting not only reporters but also shareholders and employees from every level of the company. The hall was filled to the brim, cameras flashing, microphones ready. His advisors begged him to keep it controlled, to release a polished statement, but Adrian refused. He was done with scripts. When he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted with questions. He raised his hand, and the room fell into a tense silence. "I have built my life on contracts," Adrian began, his voice echoing through the hall. "Contracts with investors, contracts with partners, even contracts with my own image. But the truth is that I let those contracts replace what truly matters: honesty. I entered into a staged relationship to satisfy expectations. I lied. Not only to you, but to myself. And for that, I take full responsibility." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reynolds smirked from the side of the room, waiting for Adrian to fall apart. But Adrian stood taller. "This company is more than one man. If you choose to remove me, I will walk away. But before you decide, I want you to know something. Success without integrity is failure. Power without love is emptiness. And I refuse to continue living in emptiness." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a new diamond, but the old engagement ring he had once given Clara years ago. He held it up for the cameras to see. "There was a woman who believed in me before I had all of this. I let her go because I thought ambition mattered more. I was wrong. Clara Hart, if you are watching this, I am not asking you to forgive the man I was. I am asking you to see the man I am trying to become. No contracts, no performance, only truth." The room erupted in noise, reporters shouting, cameras flashing like lightning. Reynolds' smirk disappeared, replaced by unease. Adrian closed the box and set it on the podium. "I will let the board make their decision about my position, but my decision has already been made. I will not hide from love again." he stepped down from the stage, ignoring the barrage of questions. For the first time in years, he felt free. His empire might crumble, but it no longer mattered. That night, alone in his penthouse, Adrian stood by the window overlooking the city lights. The velvet box sat on the table beside him, glowing softly in the lamplight. Somewhere above the skyline, he imagined Clara in the cockpit of her jet, steady and strong, unaware of the storm he had just unleashed in her name. And for the first time in years, Adrian prayed not for power, not for victory, but for one more chance to show her that his love was real. The news of Adrian Cole's public confession spread faster than any business headline had before. Some called him reckless, others praised him for courage, but for Adrian, the noise no longer mattered. He waited in his penthouse, the velvet ring box on the table beside him, his eyes fixed on the door as if sheer will could summon Clara. 3 nights passed with no word. Then, on the 4th evening, a knock echoed through the silent halls. Adrian's chest tightened as he opened the door. Clara stood there, still in her pilot's jacket, rain clinging to her hair. Her eyes were unreadable, but she had come. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Adrian took a slow breath. "Because I could not pretend anymore. I built everything on performance and control, but the only truth I have ever known was with you. If I lose the company, so be it. If I lose you again without fighting for you, that would be the real failure." Lost. For a long moment, Clara studied him, the silence between them, heavy with years of regret. Then she stepped inside, her gaze falling on the velvet box on the table. She picked it up, turning it in her hands. "You kept it all this time?" Adrian nodded. "It was the one contract I wanted to honor but never did. I am asking you to let me try again, not with signatures or obligations, but with honesty, with love." Her lips trembled, the steel in her eyes softening. "You hurt me, Adrian. You chose ambition over us." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving that I will never make that mistake again." The fire in the hearth cracked softly, filling the silence. Clara looked at the ring, then at Adrian. Slowly, she placed the box back in his hand. "Then show me. No more lies. No more contracts." Adrian dropped to one knee, not in a grand display, but in quiet sincerity. "Clara Hart, will you marry me? Not for the empire, not for appearances, only for us." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in years, her voice softened into the warmth he remembered. "Yes, Adrian, but only if you promise this is forever." His answer was a whisper and a vow. Forever. Months later, their wedding was nothing like the opulent galas of his past. It was small, intimate, held in a sunlit gallery overlooking the ocean. Friends, family, and a handful of colleagues gathered, not to witness a contract, but a promise. Clara walked down the aisle in a simple dress, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with hope. Adrian waited, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man who had learned the cost of deception and the value of truth. When they exchanged vows, Adrian slipped the old ring onto her finger, the same one he had once failed to honor. This time, it was not a symbol of status, but of redemption. As they kissed, the room erupted in applause, not for the empire, but for the love that had survived ambition, betrayal, and time. And for Adrian Cole, it was the first time he understood that real wealth was not measured in empires, but in the heart of the woman who had finally come home.